on Wednesday, Ohio State is promoting Brian Hartline, the receivers coach, probably the best receivers coach in America, promoting to offensive coordinator. Also, according to our own Pete Nakos at On3, the plan is to hire Virginia Tech offensive coordinator Tyler Bowen as the offensive line coach / run game coordinator, which would fill the roles that were required. Because remember, Justin Fry, the O-line coach, left for the Arizona Cardinals. Chip Kelly, the OC, left for the Las Vegas Raiders. So Hartline becomes the OC. Bowen becomes the run game coordinator / O-line coach. Now, what do we think this is? Do we think this is Ryan Day saying, hey, Brian Hartline, it's time to give you more responsibility. I would like you to call the offense. Do you think this is Ryan Day taking back play calling duties and saying, here's this nice title? Or do you think it's, hey, we're going to give Brian Hartline a shot? And oh, by the way, we've also hired somebody who is an experienced play caller in case we need that.
I think that I would be stunned if Ryan Day went back to calling plays. Like, I think this is, you've put in your time, you've had your results, you've recruited your ass off, you've had the best position group in America for 5 years now. Like, now's your time to call plays. Now, I do have my questions about, play calling and how good somebody in his position can be coming out of the gate. There's probably going to be growing pains. He's going to have to learn that. He's never done it. But, like, if there's any assistant in America that has worked somewhere and deserves a promotion, like, I feel like Ohio State was probably in a position where they're like, we have to give him a shot because we can't lose him. And like, that's a good place to be. So, like, I don't know. It would be insane to me if Ryan Day is like, you know what, I'm going to do this again. It's like you gave it up and won a national title. I think that's probably a pretty good indication that whatever you did last year was working.
If things really go wrong, he can just pick it up and do it. We know he can call that offense and call it effectively. So if Ryan Day is worried, or if it just doesn't work, there's a solution there. But I think you're right. Ryan Day giving up the play calling probably made him a better CEO, better head coach in general, which we have him number 2 on this list. We would not have had him number 2 on the list this time last year. And I wonder, now that he's won the national...
What would he have been last year?
He would have been in the top 5, but we would have held the Michigan thing over him. I think we would have dinged him more for the Michigan thing then than we do now, because now he's won the national title. Like, Kirby Smart has an Alabama thing, but we're okay with that. Ryan Day has a Michigan thing, but he's won the national title, so it doesn't matter as much.
Yeah, I didn't really even consider the Michigan thing anymore.
Yeah.
If they wouldn't have won the national title, he might not have even been my top 10 because of the Michigan thing. But you get enough equity in winning the national title where that doesn't necessarily.
Well, especially the way they won the national title.
Yeah, and the path that they took. Because, like, the number one thing too that you want to see, and I think that the Ohio State Michigan thing is a major cause of concern for people in Columbus. But the number one national talking point wasn't that he can't beat Michigan; it was that he couldn't win big games.
Right.
So for him to go out and win those 4 in a row in the postseason kind of puts to bed any of that. Like, that's the thing too. Like, as we get down to James Franklin and some of the other guys like Lane Kiffin, like, have they addressed the things that people neg them for? Like,
right.
And I had a hard time with that. So my balance, Andy, with Ryan Day was pretty simple. It's like, there are only how many active coaches are there with national titles now? Is it like 4? I think.
Well,
3.
We can make the list. Ryan Day, Kirby Smart, Dabo Swinney. It's the top 3 on my list.
Yeah, that's it, right?
Yeah.
So,
because Mac's not coaching anymore.
And, like, that's the thing too. It's like, I didn't just go, did you win a national title? Put me in the top 3. Like, that's not how I did my list. But, like, also too, weighting it based on what you've done and what you're doing.
Right.
Very, very.
How you've adjusted to today's game. And we'll talk about Dabo in a little bit.
And then what about also what you've done as a coordinator? Like, I don't know if that ever played a factor for you, but I was like, Brent Venables made my list, and I'm assuming that's who you're going to come after me for.
No.
Everybody's upset about Brent Venables being on the list, but, like, Brent Venables is on my list because I think you could make the case that he's every bit as, like, a part of their national titles than as Dabo.
Let's stick to Ryan Day. Because,
all right, yeah, let's stick to Ryan Day.
Because I think what you said just a minute ago was really interesting, and I hadn't thought about it that way. That the knock on Ryan Day was about the Michigan thing, yes, but was more about him winning big games. Because the way the schedule used to work, the Michigan game and the Penn State game were the big games.
Yeah.
And then there might have been one more as you got to the playoff. And, like, the Peach Bowl, that was a big game that they barely lost. If they'd won that game, they probably would have had – he probably had 2 national titles now. So they had to win 4 big games in a row. Like, they did not get any easy draw at all in this playoff. It was the hardest possible path, and they won 4 in a row. And I think the way they won this one completely changes our view of Ryan Day.
Yeah, well, the thing, too, is like the Michigan and the big game thing, like you said, were the same thing. Well, the thing that you said that was interesting, Andy, about the Ohio State-Michigan thing was that Ohio State playing Michigan was the big game.
Right.
Right, like if you lose the Michigan game, like Ohio State fans
they were playing
out.
2-game seasons because of the way the Big Ten schedule worked.
And like Ohio State's game against Michigan last year, not this past year, the year before, when the Connor Stallion stuff was happening and Sharon Moore was coaching, was one of the, 3 most hyped Ohio State-Michigan games ever. Like when you think about all,
and one of the most embarrassing for the loser.
So like those two were kind of the same, but like you do look back at the 2019 Fiesta Bowl. I think that was one of Ohio State's best teams in program history, and they lost to Clemson.
Right. To another guy that's very high on our list.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So like, they had been coming up short pretty consistently in their biggest games, losing to Oregon twice. So for them to actually get that burden off their shoulders and do what they did in the playoff, I think changes your entire brain chemistry.
I want to talk about Huel. This is the Huel Black Edition. 35 grams of protein, 27 vitamins and minerals, 7 grams of fiber. This is a complete meal in a bottle. It is the way to go when you are busy, when you can't cook, when you can't shop, when you have got to find a way to get a meal in you that gives you everything you need. Huel is the best way to do it. Go to Huel.com, Huel.com. Use the code Staples15 to get 15% off your order and a free gift. Try Huel today. My kids love it. My wife loves it. She'll grab one and take it for lunch. I'll grab one and do it for breakfast. If I can't cook, my son will hit one before he goes to school. It is the best way to get a complete meal very quickly. Huel.com, Huel.com. Use the code Staples15 to get 15% off your first order.
And I've got the theory, too.
Yeah.
My theory with Ryan Day is that because he went on this run, I don't think he's going to be as tight for the Michigan game moving forward.
He
shouldn't now that he has the equity, like I don't think he has to crap his pants anymore. Like it's like they're going to go into it. They're not. Michigan isn't anything that they didn't just beat or conquer. And Michigan's going to be very good next year, and there's probably a likelihood, or at least a coin flip that they do go to Ann Arbor next year and lose again. But that might just be because Michigan's awesome again. So I don't know. National championships right a lot of wrongs. Winning rights a lot of wrongs. And I think that the conversation about Ryan Day and whether he was fit to be Ohio State's coach 6 weeks ago or 2 months ago were rational and warranted. I really do. I don't look back at it and go, well, look, he won the national title. If you were questioning him, you're an asshole. That's not true. I think at the time, with the information that we had, with the most embarrassing loss in Ohio State history, potentially one of the top 5 most embarrassing losses, the playoff hadn't happened yet. That's all the information you had. But now he to his credit, flipped the narrative.
Well, he's also done something no coach has ever done. No coach has run that gauntlet before. And it may be that the national champ in this system does that every year. For whatever reason, the team with the hardest path goes there. But I doubt that's what's going to happen. I imagine some of the teams that get a little bit easier path might go through and win. This just so happened in the first year of this, the team with the absolute most difficult path went through it and actually went through it in a pretty dominant fashion.
Well, I think there's a lot of galaxy brain mental gymnastics you can do with this, Andy. But the Ohio State that showed up in the playoff is the Ohio State that I anticipated all year. You know how I've been talking about them. They're a super team and all this stuff. And because they were so underwhelming during the regular season and never hit that peak, it almost turned their postseason run into some sort of surprise. But if that Ohio State team would have just existed, which would have completely eradicated any discussion about whether or not he's fit to be their coach to begin with, they would have been 8-point favorites in every game they played and just beat the crap out of everybody they played. I think the perception of what they did now as a result of coming up short against Michigan and playing like crap against Nebraska and losing to Oregon early in the year looks more remarkable than it probably actually was. And that's what makes him, to me, doing this list 4 years ago was so different because I would just go look at what your recruiting results were.
Right. And it's not like that anymore.
Not like that anymore. But Ryan Day, without question, unequivocally, is one of the 3 best roster builders in America.
Well, and
so,
I think, I wrote about this at the beginning of the season, and I'm curious to see how this plays out, because I said Ryan Day strikes me as the kind of person who will be able to retain better rosters, not just because of Ohio State's finances, because everybody has money at the top, but because of who he is and because of the way he coaches. He's a pretty normal dude. And you saw,
he even looks normal in all these like late night television appearances he's making.
But you saw Jack Sawyer in the way that he talked about him. You saw Will Howard. You saw Donovan Jackson. The way those guys talked about Ryan Day, they love him. They absolutely love. This is not a case like he doesn't rule by fear, which that worked before because you had to sit out a year if you transferred. Like, you can't do that anymore. Now, when you have players the quality of Ohio State's players, they can just go somewhere else, play right away, make a ton of money. Like, you better give them a reason to stay. And I think Ryan Day is actually built for that generation more so than some of the dominant coaches of the past.
Yeah, well, also, too, like, if you look at where Ohio State is, as a program, they are as equipped, if not more equipped, than every other team in college football to continue sustained success. So it's like they're going to lose a lot of guys this year, and they lost some coaches. Mm-hmm. They're going to maybe have some growing pains next year. But when it comes to NIL and the way that they've recruited, out of high school, like they are sustained. They are well, and now
comes the hard part, the part that Nick Saban made look easy and kind of spoiled it for everybody else. When you do have both your coordinators leave after a national title run, like Saban did that and kept replacing people and kept figuring out how to win national titles. That's not that easy. Like Kirby Smart lost Dan Lanning. He made Glenn Schumann the defensive coordinator. They won another national title. Like, that part's pretty hard. So,
but you know what's nuts? Like, if Ohio State would have beaten Georgia, and I know the if game
a
few years ago, or if Ohio State wins another national title in the next 2 years,
Day's number one on the list.
You might have a new king of the sport, which in Kirby Smart 12 months ago was the unequivocal number one. I still think he is.
Yeah,
I don't think either of us. But like, Day is a Michigan win away and a deep playoff run next year away from potentially being number one on this list.
Yeah.
So, and by the way, 3 months ago I might have had him at like 14. Okay, so like that, but like also is a testament to how much winning cures things. Now, here's another theory that I have about Ryan Day, and then as it pertains to the rest of the list too.
Right. Okay.
We work at On3.
We do.
Our website does a very good job, especially Pete Nakos, in helping people understand NIL and the transfer portal.
Yes.
And it's a very essential piece to building a roster. I think it has gotten a lot of attention, and rightfully so, and it should continue to get attention. But I think that part of that attention has also made people forget how important high school recruiting is.
It's still the most important thing.
And I really think that this next year, and this is in my playoff bracket when we get to it, you're going to see a lot of the teams that I have making it and going deep into this tournament are teams that recruit really well out of high school, because I think we're going to have a regression back to which rosters are built the best.
I don't think we ever had a progression. Yeah. I think it's still
Florida
always
State 2 years ago was a progression.
I guess so. That's
there were certain teams like Michigan State when Mel Tucker had
Kenneth
Walker, like that. Like there were certain players that were transcendent at their new places. There were certain teams,
but those teams didn't win it all. Like the teams that were in the mix to win it all were always the ones.
Because even Michigan last year, they had some important pieces that they brought in, but the best players on their team were all high school recruits that they developed.
Right. They plugged in about 3 key transfers. They had a left tackle, a center, and an edge rusher. Everybody else were guys that they brought in from high school.
I do wonder, like, if we go into the future 5, 6, 7 years from now, and we look back at the next 6 champions, if they're all going to be the same teams that are recruiting well. And the thing that I think is interesting is that teams go up and down in the rankings, but like there isn't that much difference in the recruiting ranking.
Well, I think there's room for a Michigan that wasn't recruiting at a top 5 every year kind of level.
I also think that was a fallacy, because all of Michigan's best players on that team were 5-star prospects. Like they didn't recruit the same. They didn't recruit
Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant were not.
Yeah, that's right. So, yeah, I mean like Will Johnson and
Donovan Edwards, JJ McCarthy.
Yeah. I mean there are a lot of really good players. They did a good job of doing a balance of it. But
Yeah.
I would have said 3 years ago too, Andy, that roster was impossible. So
I
they
think
did do it.
I think that opens it up for, say, a South Carolina, which does
Yeah.
the top end talent, the Dylan Stewarts, the Josiah Washingtons, and also recruits well,
And
evaluates
develops.
well,
Yeah.
and develops. So it's gonna be fun to watch. But Ryan Day, I think, is good at all of this stuff, and that's why we have him at number 2. Kirby Smart is probably the best at all of this stuff, and that's why he's at number 1.